Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us at the 30 something podcast today, where we spill the tea on being 30. So today we have a guest speaker, but I'm just going to start us first by introducing ourselves. So my name is Melissa Eadie. I'm 31 years old. I am a luxury bridal artist, and I also am an author of my book, Held. It's about my cancer journey. And I am going to pass you over to my co-host, Callie, to introduce herself.
Hey, I'm Callie, also an author of two books. Dear Future Husband just came out a few weeks ago, and Hang in There Girl came out last year. Also a U.S. history teacher and a ventriloquist. No, I'm not actually a ventriloquist. That was a fake.
I wish you were. I wish you were.
That would be really cool. I could have like a little like puppet or something. I don't know. That might be kind of creepy too. But instead of me being weird for another 5 minutes, I'm going to pass on over to our guest, Jess.
Our guests.
Yes,
We have two guests today. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see.
Hi, I'm Jessica Whitehead, and I am Melissa's sister. I am the oldest of five, and I am a government contractor who was married. Well, I guess I should say I was married in my 30s, and this is my little boy, Lincoln. Lincoln, say hello to everybody. And he is just a little fussy, so hopefully he'll settle down.
Everyone's blaming me on this because I was like, bring the baby. It will be so much fun. And I also love him. And so I like want to see him all the time. I was just like, Jessica, she's like, oh, I have a babysitter. It's like, no, bring him. Bring him. And then it was like 5 minutes into us, like, we were having technical issues, which is why I don't know how my mic is right now. Hopefully it's okay. But lots of technical issues, and then he got cranky. He was fine in the beginning, but
he was fine. He was fine until the technical issues, and then he got a little saucy.
Well, if you guys have listened to our other episodes, you know that we love to go over a nostalgic thing. For me, we're going to be talking about little shows or audios that we listened to as kids. Mine was VeggieTales was solid in my youth. I mean, literally, yes, it was. It was. VeggieTales, guys, was so above its time. It was so funny. Like adults would watch. I mean, my parents would watch it with us and think it was funny. I remember like Jessica and Dan were older and they would think it was funny. And Daniel's my older brother. I just said that. But yeah, it was legit so funny. And my youngest brother has some special needs, and he loves VeggieTales, and I love watching it with him. And it's fun to have that nostalgic moment with him. What about you, Callie?
I love VeggieTales too. Barney was my man. Like I was obsessed with Barney. I called him Boo. Like like because I don't know, I think we're both 92 babies, so we were like the prime target age, because what the Lions group came out with Barney in what, like 87, something like that. So it was like 92 was like that golden era for like Barney babies. I remember my first concert was Barney, and I got to see Barney live when I was 3.
Why and are you so cool?
I sported this awesome sweatshirt that was like a Lion King sweatshirt, and I had this little like Barney little balloon thing, and I got to see Barney sing live, and it was like magic. And I got to stand by Barney's tour bus and all the things. So like I was just ready to hop on that tour bus and go tour all over with Barney.
You were going to be a Barney's kid forever.
I mean, honestly,
world tour with Barney.
World tour with Barney. I would become like one of Barney's little like kids, like friends that like sing. I just can't dance, so that would have been a little awkward, but that's okay.
So cool. We never went to concerts as kids. No. What about you, Jess?
For me, it would have to be Adventures in Odyssey, which I know that they actually still make episodes to this day. But I remember like car rides, listening to Adventures in Odyssey with my parents as we were like going to church, or like when we were like going on vacation, we would have a whole bunch of Adventures in Odyssey cassettes. Yes, we did listen to cassettes.
The cassettes, y'all.
They were the best.
We would just play them one after another. And then I also remember like going over for like 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 I would go and I'd spend the night at my cousin's house, and I remember we would fall asleep to Adventures in Odyssey. So like it was a pretty big part of my life.
Solid choice.
Yeah.
I would still watch that today, honestly. So
oh my goodness, I do. I still listen to episodes.
They were good. Cassettes are coming back, by the way. I have seen several artists who have like released their content on cassettes. And well, so this is what was interesting. This like it started like 2-3 years ago because one of my youth kids came up and she was like, Miss Callie, I'm like all like I gotta get some cassettes. And I'm like, you really want a cassette? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. I was like, why? You have Spotify. Have you heard of a CD? I mean, that's even. And I'm obsessed with CDs still. And she's like, no, I need a cassette. So I got her a cassette, and then she found out that she has to like rewind it for it to like play back and all this stuff. And then she's like, oh, I don't like these anymore. I'm like, I told you. I was like, I was in that like era where like we had cassettes and we were cursed with the cassettes. And then it was like what, around 2000, they started doing more CDs and stuff. And I remember my first CD was like, I think the Parent Trap CD. And I guarded that thing with my life. It is still in my car to this day. But anyway.
Oh my God. I love it, guys. I love it. I'm super excited for today because me and Callie were talking about, we're doing kind of like a couple episodes on relationships. And the biggest one that we really wanted to talk about was like marriage in your 30s. Because we're longing for that and we're waiting for that. But of course we couldn't really talk about it because neither of us are married. So we were kind of like talking about how we could do this episode. And we were like, we should have Jessica because Jessica was 36 when she got married. And Callie was like, that's a great idea. So we're super excited to have you on, Jess, today. And again, we do have a YouTube channel. If you want to see our faces, you guys can go check us out on the 30 something podcast YouTube channel. And then also just throwing this in here really quickly. We do want stories from you guys on being in your 30s and journeys and funny things. So we have an Instagram as well that you can DM us there. But so I'm gonna go to Jessica. I'm gonna take the baby.
Okay.
Because I want him.
Hi, buddy.
And the first question is, Jess, I just want like people listening to get to know you a little bit better. So can you give us a little bit of a background of, you already, people know you're 37 and you have a baby and you're married, but maybe just like a little bit about yourself and the journey to getting where you are.
Definitely. So a little bit about myself. I am 37 years old. I am the oldest of 5 children. We were all homeschooled, so that was a really fun adventure because my classmates were my siblings. And I am a government contractor. I got married at 36. And then shortly after, this little guy came around. So very blessed for that. That's a little bit about me. I am the children's worship leader at my church, and I absolutely love that. I'm very passionate about just sowing into the lives of my kids, and that's just a ministry that has my heart. And my husband and I, we love leading worship together, and God really just orchestrated our meeting, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, Jess. I mean, I got to live this story out with her, so it's easy for me to just be like, not needing to fill anything in because I know all the details. But I was thinking about like some stuff that I wonder about, like when I'll experience like marriage and stuff. And I guess like my first thing is like, what were some expectations of marriage that you had maybe in your high school years to your 20s that shifted in your 30s?
That is a great question. Well, I think the biggest thing was that I thought I'd be married by 21. I was like, I am going to be married by 21. I'm super mature. I'm ready to be married. And then when it did not happen, I was like, what is going on? And, you know, actually thinking back on it now in my 30s, I'm very thankful I didn't get married as 21-year-old Jessica, because I think I needed to be 30-year-old Jessica to be in a healthier relationship, because marriage is tough. I think there's a lot of layers in how God grows us and prepares us to be with the person we're with, you know? And I mean, I think you can marry the person that you've known and dated for many, 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 many years, and then still be in marriage. And there's layers that you're still learning about the person, and there's areas of life that you're still learning to grow in, you know? And that's really important. So I think for me, if I had to go back and talk to 21-year-old Jessica, I would let her know that it's okay, because God's going to give you what you need to have a healthier marriage, you know? Because I think we sometimes idealize what marriage is. We look at the TV shows and we look at movies, and we have this concept that like we are never going to go through any hard things, you know? And sometimes marriage has areas where you're taking two people from very different backgrounds, and you are learning to live together as one family, you know? And so it's really important that you are actively learning about who you are and growing yourself, you know? And so I think in my 20s, where I thought I knew everything, there were so many hurts and wounds that I had to work out in myself. You know, it wasn't until my 30s that I realized that I had wounds from being bullied when I was 12, you know, that impacted how I reacted to things, that like I suffered with this immense fear of rejection. And it wasn't until my 30s that I realized, oh my goodness, I make decisions because I'm afraid that people are going to reject me. And so I grew so much in my 30s and became so much more confident that, I mean, I would just encourage everybody, no matter where you are in life, to continue to grow yourself, because those wounds that live inside of us do directly impact how we react once we're married.
So I have a question. So I think Mel can agree with me. Like, I think one of the hardest things has been like that waiting season in between, because I think there is times when you're super busy, when career's doing well, or you're hanging out with your friends, and you're like living life, and you're like, oh, it's fun, like I'm okay. And then there's those moments, and it's, you know, it's usually like 2 o'clock in the morning, you're just laying in bed, you can't sleep, and you're just feeling kind of sad and lonely. So what were some of the things did you experience, I guess, some of those times where it was harder to be in the waiting period, and what were some of the things that kind of got you through to the other side, to encourage listeners who might be relating and kind of feeling that sadness, or that kind of like, hey, how did this person handle that?
I think the biggest thing is to first and foremost know that there's nothing wrong with you, because I think that's one thing that always hit me, is like, why does no one want to date me? Why does no one want to be married to me? I'm like this amazing catch, and I love the Lord, and I'm going after him with all my heart. And why am I still waiting? Like, I feel like sometimes we don't see the waiting as the blessing that it is. And so what God has really taught me is that in the waiting, we learn different layers of who we're supposed to be. So, for example, when you are single, you have a mission as a single person. And that's so important. Like, we should not devalue the fact that there is a beauty in our singleness. There's things that we can do. Like, I could literally, when I was single, I could literally pack all my things up and move to another country and do missions there, or teach, or do whatever was on my heart that I felt God was leading me into. And as a married woman, now I have to talk about it with my husband, and we have to pray about what God is leading us into. So it's a new dynamic, you know. But as a single person, there's so much God has for you that you can just freely chase after. But I think so often we look at it as there's something wrong with me, or there's a reason that I'm not in a relationship, because we aren't putting the right emphasis into that waiting season. we kind of sometimes, I think, see that waiting season as a hardship because we're not entering the season where we're supposed to blossom. But the thing is that being single doesn't mean you're not blossoming. Being single means you're blossoming in a different way, in a way that I actually think is super powerful, because you become this vessel for the Lord that just so freely moves forward and backwards and however God wants you to go, because you are single. It's just you and God. Then when you're married, it becomes you, God, and your spouse, and you have to make sure you guys are on the same page with the Lord, you know? So there's not as much, I think when you're single, there's so much freedom to move. You can just chase after God without anything holding you back, you know? But we don't see that, you know? So I would encourage single people to see value in that single period, you know? That waiting period, that place of being single is so beautiful, because it's where you figure out who you are and you grow in who God has called you to be. And that creates the dynamic that builds a beautiful marriage.
I love that. So I was wondering, so you're the oldest out of 5 kids.
Yeah.
And 2 of our brothers got married before you did.
Yes.
And I was just like thinking about that and thinking about how like you like raised, you helped raise. Our parents raised us.
Our parents were great.
Yeah, they were great. They were
Great.
great. But Jessica was very highly involved in our life. And of course, and so like watching your younger brothers who, you know, you've loved and supported, and it was like they were finding love. And I don't want this to sound morbid, because like, you know, it's not supposed to be a sad question, but you know, you watched your brothers get married, and then God still had you in the waiting. And what was that like? Like,
it was, you know, I think that what makes the waiting period the hardest is the society we live in.
that's a good point.
Because there's so much pressure to get married, you know, and there's so much, I guess the only word is really, there's like a deep value in that singlehood. And so because of that kind of way that we look at being single, when you are single and you're watching everyone around you get married, you do kind of feel like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not getting married? I mean, for me, I was a youth leader for 12 years. I was a youth leader for a very long time. And I think the hardest thing, actually harder than watching my siblings get married, was watching the kids that I had mentored get married and have children. You know, like,
that's interesting.
You know, because my siblings, when they got married and started, like when Dan started having kids, I got to enjoy his children, you know, and I got to, like, for me, I never felt like I was lacking. I was Aunt Jessica. And then I got a sister-in-law, so I got another sister, you know? So like for me, I got to enjoy those layers of their marriage, and I got to celebrate with them. And that's my personality. I love to celebrate people.
Yeah.
I think if I had a different personality and I didn't like to celebrate people, it would have been a lot harder.
Yeah.
But it was really, really hard to watch kids that I'd poured into become adults, get married, and have babies. And here I was still waiting, you know? And I have a lot of conversations with the Lord about, like, okay, God, like, what's going on? Like, I'm okay with being single forever, but you have to, like, take away the desire. Because I had longed to be married for so long, and I was okay with, like, any direction God had for me, but I was going to need to be married to be gone for me to be fully satisfied. You know, one of my friends who was single, she said, you know, people sometimes say that, like, once you're satisfied with being single, that's when you meet your spouse. And she never had that. She was never satisfied being single. And I think sometimes that's the journey. Like, sometimes we know the promise God has given us so much that it's hard to be, like, satisfied without that promise being fulfilled. And so the challenge is to just keep moving forward as you're waiting for the promise to be fulfilled, and to not let resentment take a hold of you, and to find joy in the season you're in. So yeah, so it's like that's kind of what the Lord brought me to. He brought me to a place where I found joy in the season I was in, while still laying an expectation for what was to come.
See, I like that a lot, because I've heard that said so many times. Where it's like, well, it'll happen when you least expect it, or when you finally stop looking for it, or you basically give up. And I'm like, do I have to like lose all will to live too? Like, like wow, okay, like once you're ready to jump from the third story window, that's when he shows up, and I'm like, because I'm taking it way too far.
Jump right into his arms.
But that's it. He's a firefighter now. So, but he rescues me. No, but I've heard that said before too, and I remember listening to this incredible series by Matt Chandler. Years and years ago, and he was kind of talking about like kind of breaking that myth of like, okay, there's nobody who absolutely totally becomes like totally content being single. He's like, because if they were fully in that place, imagine how hard it would be to rip them from that to then be even willing to go on a date kind of thing. And it was like, so let's actually like adjust a little bit how we phrase things, stuff like that. And so I appreciate you kind of breaking that I don't know, that like thing that like it gets said a lot. It's almost become kind of cliche, like, well, when you're not looking, it'll happen, or stuff. So I appreciate that 2 cents, because it's a fear. It's definitely a fear in the back of your head that you have, like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? How can I, what do I need to do to get to the point where then I'm just not wanting it, and what's the difference between being apathetic about it or content, So I appreciate like your 2 cents on that.
And what I would encourage single people to do is just not to linger and wait. I think sometimes we hold off doing what we're supposed to do because we're like, oh, that next chapter is going to happen when I meet the person I'm supposed to be married.
Yeah.
And don't do that. Do what God has set before you. Do what you're passionate about, that you're supposed to be chasing after. And when you're chasing after it, that's when you meet the person. Like for me, I was chasing so hard after God and everything he was putting in front of me. I was like starting a music program at my church. I, had been totally redesigning our worship team and like doing all these layers, like where I was just sold out to chasing after the Lord's project plan. I would say the Lord's plan for me. At that time in my life, I was chasing after him so hard, and literally my husband walked in the door. But first and foremost, I was doing what God had for me as a single person. And I think that's what we should be doing. We should be chasing so hard and not waiting, not lingering and holding off. Like, do what God has called you to do now. And in the midst of doing God's work, like when the time is right, you look up and that person is there. But what makes it feel less draining is the fact that we are actively doing what brings us joy in the Lord,
So, okay, new question for you. What was one, or maybe even the most, you don't have to share the most, but like, what was one unexpected aspect of marriage that you did not see coming, that maybe a friend had not told you, that was kind of like, okay, that was not on my bingo card for being married, but you know what? We'll add it in free space. So,
oh goodness. I think for me, the thing was that you can 100% absolutely know that you are marrying the person that God has for you, and you guys are going to still potentially run into things that you never expected, and I think that for me was like, I was like, and people used to joke with me because I'd be like, I'm waiting for the right person. And when I meet the right person, I'm not like so silly to not think that we won't ever fight, but we're not going to have big issues because we're the ones for one another. And what I failed to consider was the fact that we are 2 very different humans who are now trying to live in each other's space. And we have been grown into very different families, and we're trying to create our own. And that is really important because I can't mold my family and make my husband fit into that in our marriage. And he can't mold me into his family and make me fit into what he thinks it's supposed to be like. We really have to create our own family dynamic. And that sometimes means that there is going to be friction and things that we're going to have to learn to communicate through. And like, that is one thing I will say. Like, my husband and I, we worked so hard before we got married to have strong communication. And that is such a valuable thing, because the devil does not like marriage. Marriage is such a powerful dynamic. It says in the word of God, when two or more are gathered, God is there. And what is a married couple? A married couple is always two, so God is always present in their relationship. And so the devil, I believe that's why he attacks marriages so much. So I think the thing is to know that there's an attack on marriage. Don't go into marriage thinking that there's not going to be an attack, because the devil is not happy. You are a powerhouse with your spouse, So
that's why it's so important to be equally yoked too. Because if you, are with somebody who doesn't know God or is not a Christian too, like, man, can't even imagine how hard that would be. So that's cool to hear, like, having that same faith.
Yeah. And being a prayer warrior, like, pray for your spouse. That's something that I knew was important. I mean, I prayed for my spouse before I ever even like met him. But really, when you're in your marriage, the most important thing you can do is pray for your spouse when you're not together, and pray for each other when you are. Like, set aside time where you are actually having prayer time together. Yes, Lincoln agrees with that. Prayer time, family prayer is super
I love
important.
That.
He's already praying.
That's an awesome answer. Thank you, Jess. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I have another question. What is something different you have seen based off your own experience versus in your 30s, getting married in your 30s, versus friends who have gotten married in their 20s?
Oh, okay. This is a good question. So I think the biggest difference between watching friends who have gotten married in their 20s versus friends like myself who are married in their 30s is, when you're in your 20s, you are still figuring out so much of who you are. Like, so much of who you are. And in a lot of ways, you and your spouse kind of grow together, And so you start to really kind of become a unit, because you're still figuring out who you are, and you figure it out on that journey together. When you're in your 30s, you've really figured out who you are. Like, like, I know my likes, I know my dislikes, I know my passions. And in a lot of ways, it made it really great for me to choose a spouse, because I knew one thing I definitely didn't want, and I knew what I definitely wanted in a spouse. I like knew. And it wasn't just infatuation. I mean, like, I truly believe my husband was who I was supposed to marry, but I didn't just marry him because he walked in and he was like really cute, Like, I got to know him and I was like, you check all the boxes, like everything that I had wanted, But I think the one thing that is hard when you're in your 30s is, because you have found out who you are so much, sometimes it's hard then to kind of twist and shape yourself into who you're supposed to be as a unit, And so I would encourage people who are in their 30s to know that, like, hey, sometimes we have to grow. We have to grow ourselves. I mean, we should always be growing ourselves, but we can never be so gelled in who we are that we don't start to grow in a way that is beneficial for our marriage. That doesn't mean to lose yourself. I think that's the perk about being in your 30s, is you know who you are, but sometimes you have to look back and say, you know what, I have been really self-sufficient. I've paid all of my bills. I've never had to ask for anything. Now I need to learn how to go to my husband and say, hey, is it okay if we do this? Or is it okay if we do that? And like, learning to be a team, because you've been so independent for so long. You have to now learn to kind of be a team together.
Yeah. Okay. Final question as we're landing the plane here. So, is the grass greener on the other side? meaning like, Melly and I are over on, the single side of the grass, and you're on the married side of the grass. Is the grass greener over there?
I think the danger of thinking that the grass is greener is that the grass always looks greener when you're on the other side,
Ooh,
and
okay.
so like, It is. And I think the challenge for us is to be fully present and satisfied in the season we're in, on the green side we're in, you know? And like when I was pregnant with Lincoln, that was one thing God kept talking to me about, was like, hey, enjoy every moment of being pregnant, because you'll never be pregnant again with Lincoln. All of these are Lincoln first, you know? And it's the same thing with raising him. Like I could wish that he was like already 5 and like talking and things like that, but then I would miss Lincoln as a baby, you know? And I think that is why we have to be careful about not looking at the grass is greener on the other side, because if we do that, we kind of long to be on the other side because it looks better, but it's not better. It's just a different season. It's just a different place in our life. And so I think we have to learn to enjoy where we are right now and be present where we are. Because if we don't enjoy being single, we will never fully enjoy being married. And if we don't enjoy being married, we will never fully enjoy being a parent. Like you have to be satisfied where you are right now instead of always looking for the other side.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Jess, thank you so much for coming on, and especially for bringing the baby. I know he got a little chatty at one point, but he's ready for his own podcast. But thank you so much for being on here. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. Like, I know me and Callie really took away a lot from this, because again, like, I think we can both relate to feeling like, Lord, but I'm so ready. Like, I'm so ready, and I know that, like, I will love my husband so well, and I will be such a good wife, and all those things that, you know, you like really feel. But I think my biggest takeaway from tonight is just like being like, okay, but you're not married yet, and that's not the season you have right now. And so be content where you are, be grateful, and have a heart of gratitude for like the season you're in right now. Because sometimes I do think about how I get to come home to an empty house and it's quiet, and like I do think in marriage you sacrifice some independence, of course, you know. So I've been thinking about that more, like, am I ready to give up like my alone time in my cozy little apartment, for one, you know. Anything else you want to add, Callie, before we hop off?
Just thank you so much, Jess. This was like, I don't know, like you really affirmed a lot of the things like I was kind of curious about too, and I think it's going to help the listeners a whole lot, and people to feel encouraged. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you for listeners for listening, and please do send us any more questions and stuff that you have, and we will forward them to Jess and get you answers and stuff, and maybe have you back on sometime too if you're game.
Yes, we would love that. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the 30-something podcast, where we are 30s, flirties, and sometimes kind of surviving. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
Bye.